priest, then the priest matchup is gone. And that, right, like it's the same thing where all you're doing is stopping your opponent from playing priest. They're just not going to queue priest in that matchup. They're going to queue a different deck because they know that you have the hard counter with paladin.
Cool. So you have 5 bans instead of 4, half the time.
Yeah, but then you're banning priest. Who wants to ban priest, Lorinda?
No, the paladin bans the priest for you.
Or whatever. Who wants to do that?
I like it when people ban priest because I don't have to talk about priest.
I love priest games. I want to see as much priest as possible in this broadcast. In fact, I hope we have 5 priest mirrors coming up right now. Hour-long games. Let's have a 5-hour series. We're playing a mixture of LHS and Conquest. People can stay on their same deck. It's going to be priest specialists versus each other.
And this is why Galen plays Hearthstone for a living.
That is definitely not why I play Hearthstone. Holy cow.
No, because your ideas, man. We don't want any of those. So I like the Paladin thing. I think it's good that you've got 6 decks that you can play. I do think it's good also if the meta happens to be like the one you got in Grandmasters where you have to play the worst decks only. That kind of didn't work out too great. I don't think a lot of players enjoyed it that much. Don't mind saying that. So having to not play those decks is good.
Yeah, I mean, with that format, it's a lot different from this one because you don't have to play like with this format specifically. LHS is just like a lot more strategy based, I think, because you can actually craft your lineup. And I was clowning on your paladin idea a bit, but there is some real strategies to something like that. I'm just giving you a hard time.
That's fine. I'm used to it.
It's very
You're
marginal.
Just fitting in with the other casters. I understand.
It's a very marginal increase in win rate, but there is a small increase. If you find like a genius strategy that beats priest, for example, you get like maybe 1 or 2% in the series. And I think LHS just in general has a lot more intricacies with like picks and bans phase and like what decks you're going to queue compared to Conquest. And also a thing that we haven't really talked about that much in this tournament. Players do not ban out. They don't ban 4 decks at the same time and then submit them at the same time. Players ban 1 deck from their opponent. Both teams get to see which deck is banned. They ban 2, do the same thing, and then ban 1 more. So there's actually like a multi-step process in the middle here. We haven't really seen that effect too much. I think players have been pretty much consistent in banning the strongest decks, Warrior, Demon Hunter, Rogue, Warlock, specifically Hunter as well. But it does add that little edge that players can get. So, there's all these little things that players can do compared to the format that we saw in Grandmasters Season 1 of this year. But that being said, we do have Blue on Priest versus Yuyi on Druid, and we did see Blue play this matchup earlier and get rolled. Do you think that's because they played it incorrectly, Lorinda?
I mean, if you get rolled by Druid, you get rolled by Druid. That seems to be the thing. I think the Druid play is more important than the opponent's play a lot of the time. I don't just mean what they draw, but even how they play what they draw as the Druid as well. I will now accept there is skill in playing Druid well. I've been put right too many times on my mistakes to think it's just play your cards on curve, I think. But I do think that it's very hard to have much influence as the opposition a lot of the time against Druid. If they play well, then you're struggling. If they draw well and play well, then you're really, really struggling.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story of Druid right now, is that a great player with a good hand is unstoppable on Druid. And even though I don't think Druid is necessarily one of the top 5 decks, that's the reason why you see it not banned in a lot of cases. There are certain draws that it has that, rival some of the best decks in Hearthstone that have ever existed. When you get the early ramp cards in multiples and then a power play on turn 4, turn 5, there's not much the other person can do about it. We're looking at Yuyi versus Blue. Yuyi has a more storied career just based on the fact that he's 8 times the prize earnings as Blue. Blue seemingly a newer player. And looking at the strength showdown, it does seem like Blue is not as nearly as experienced as Yuyi based off the Chinese casters.
Yeah, and some fairly grim numbers in there. Like, decision making is not where you want to be 3 out of 5. But overall, you can see from the results, you can see from the team that he is more of an up-and-coming player. And I've read some of the things he's written about Warrior, and very informative player. Obviously thinks about things in depth and knows what's going on. And those are the players that watching them develop is great to see, because he'll probably be a pretty strong player in the next few months.
Yeah, the people that understand deck building understand like a really key aspect of Hearthstone. There's lots of pro players that in a lot of respects just follow the meta rather than like innovate. People that come to mind that really stick out that don't follow the meta are people like No Hands Gamer, who pioneered the aggro warrior list that we see at tier 1 that's been nerfed multiple times. He pioneered the Cube Priest, which introduced Imprisoned Vile Fiend and potentially Apotheosis into a lot of priest builds. And if you are someone that can innovate in an already like pretty solid meta and actually come out ahead, then you're doing something really spectacular. So if players like Blue, I like players like Blue.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've got to face Briarthorn, aka Brimfall, next year.
Okay, well, there's a difference between pioneering and autofilling your deck. Okay, first off.
Is that safe to say when you lose to him week 1 now? We're going to have that broadcast.
Yeah,
Galen says Brimfall autofills decks. Okay, that's the first bit of spice. It's season 4 of Grandmasters coming to you soon.
I probably shouldn't call him out because I think I have like a solid 0% win rate versus players that I've called out in the past. I think I've done it 3 times and I'm 0-3 right now. So you know what? Brimfold, nothing but respect for Argent Squire, Reno Mage. Best deck in the format. You know what's up. Anyways, we're going into Priest versus Druid. And this time, the opening hand for Druid is much less spicy than Tice's hand with the Breath of Dreams and a Dragon.
Yeah, sure, but I'm just... Okay, the hand has not developed particularly well for the Druid yet.
A Dragon would be pretty much the only thing that UE wants at this point. I guess Overgrowth as well. Can't really complain about that. Also Fungal Fortunes. Can't really complain about that. Okay, so there's a lot of cards that UE wants right now.
Yeah, exactly. And Blue's got the closest thing a Priest gets to a perfect curve. He's going to be able to actually put some pressure on and pretend to be Demon Hunter for a few minutes.
Interesting that Yuyi decides to cast Breath of Dreams there. Okay, well, he got massively punished, and I wanted to bring this up before we see what was drawn, because the point that I wanted to make is if Yuyi waits a turn, I really don't think that delays any of his game plan. If he saves Breath of Dreams, he gives himself the opportunity to get 1 card deeper into his deck and have 3 more chances at a dragon, because there's 3 out of 23 cards in his deck are dragons. Maybe the odds of ramping were great enough to hold onto the Breath of Dreams in hopes of like that extra card being a dragon, and actually ended up being a dragon, which really it seems really results oriented, right?
Just what do you think about how Blue's playing this way? He decided he could have just gone for straight curve, but saving Pyromancer and the good cards for later, which sometimes doesn't happen against Druid. Sometimes there is no later.
So normally I would be down to play minions against Druid. However, while Pyromancer is a very strong card in this matchup just to deal with Glowfly Swarm specifically, so I don't really mind it that much. I imagine that, yeah, I think this is the turn where Blue's going to start capitalizing. He saw that the Druid's hand was Hero Power Pass, which is very unfortunate. Not at all the strong hand that we saw from Tice in this previous match that we had between G2 and LF. But a top deck Glowfly Swarm still doesn't really get the job done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the most terrifying of things ever.
Can Blue get away with
that he used
playing
the
a
coin last
minion
turn.
here? Doesn't seem like it. Smart sequencing. I know this is pretty obvious, but just going Thoughtseal first in the hopes that he hits a dragon so the Breath of Intent doesn't kill his 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
Just a small thing worth pointing out.
I mean, it's just nice to see those bits and pieces. It goes without saying when these players are playing that they get most of those things right, so we tend to just ignore it. But it's actually really important, because when we pull them up on a mistake, we haven't mentioned the 15 things they did really tidily that didn't really matter but were still very nice before that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, like
when you
at a certain point, some things become obvious when they really aren't. I don't think.
Yeah, when you're like my level and you know all these things, you talk about all these things, but then you actually get into a serious competitive game with pressure on. Playing things in the right order goes from being trivially easy to somewhat impossible.
Interesting deviation away from the Emerald Drake, just going for the ramp instead. I imagine that means that Yu wants to capitalize on the exotic Mount Seller next turn. Problem is that there's really no good way of doing that. Blue gets his own overgrowth, and that pretty much directly counters Yu's game plan. Yu really wanted to capitalize on this additional mana, but Blue can just ramp in response.
Oh, Priest. Just doing what your opponent does. Must be nice sitting there on the same mana as your opponent.
To be fair, Rampant Priest is way stronger than Rampant Druid, because Druid is generally designed to... the Hearthstone game designers do not design Druid to be like, oh yeah, we're going to ramp and then you're going to auto-win, even though sometimes it feels like that. But with Priest specifically, none of the cards are designed with ramping in mind. So I think that ramping just generally disproportionately benefits Priest compared to Druid right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. In fact, in general, just getting things from other classes tends to do that for every class. Imagine giving Rogues Fireball or something. Like, yeah, good luck.
Rogues Antonitis. I think that was always like the classic example. If you gave Rogues Antonitis, that would just be broken.
Yeah, that sounds pretty ridiculous. So the game is about to kick off next turn.
I imagine that Yu would like to go Exotic Mount Seller, Innervate, Moonfire, Soul of the Forest as his play next turn, rather than something like Ysera. It just puts more stuff in play, and generally more stuff is what you want to be going for.
Yeah, because outside of Soul Mirror, Priests don't actually deal with wide boards very well these days. Not in traditional builds, at least. They have the option to, of course, with like Plague of Death. But in general, they'll play a minion and kill your biggest thing, rather than kill everything.
Wow, Time Rip here instead of Sandhoof Water Bear. I really think that this might have been a missed opportunity by Blue. I guess, no, even then you could heal your own face or heal your minion with the Crystal Power. I think that developing a minion might have been the stronger line here compared to the Time Rip. Time Rip seems like a really important card, especially when you know your opponent has like a Exotic Mount Seller or a large dragon that could be not a 5-attack minion, like Ysera is.
Yeah, because he has the one death, but you're going to have to face more than one thing over the course of the next few turns a lot of the time. So
yeah,
looking after your removal spells is important. And I say it almost every broadcast I have at some point, but minions are removal spells for control decks. So getting the Sandhoof out would have made sense to me.
Solmir is looking very strong here. In fact, I really don't see a good play for Yu after the Solmir comes down. Obviously, Solmir will summon an Exotic Mount Seller that's still alive.
Yeah.
And then Blue can just use that to play more spells and get more minions. Oh, he's just going for this instead.
I liked your play. I like the Soul Mirror.
I think the Soul Mirror was still much better than what ended up happening here.
It would have killed everything, I think, especially with the Crystal Power in hand.
It would have killed everything and made a larger board.
Stuff. Yeah.
I
think it made a winning
later.
Board.
Again, it probably doesn't matter at this point. I don't really see a world where Yu wins. I think they both accomplished the same goal, so I'm not really gonna,
Okay.
I mean, look at what's happening here, Lorinda. Right? Like, there's a 4/8 in play. He's ahead on board by like 8 million stats.
Mm-hmm. I just
8
9
million
million stats.
Usually a little bit over enough to beat Druid's boards. Usually.
That is a thing with pro players, and we've actually seen Blue playing pretty quickly as well, is if they see a line that wins, then it's a line that wins, right? You don't need to find another way to win, as long as you're sure it gets there.
Yeah, I think that my line won like 180% of the time, and his won like 165% of the time, but both are like way over 100%, you know what I mean?
Way over 100%. An American gallon is way under a British gallon.
I don't know I don't know the conversion.
Actually true.
You're the one that wasted your time learning other systems' volumetric measurements.
Oh, Blue's spoiled for choice now.
Everything wins. It doesn't matter. Just play your cards. Go face.
Shadow Word Priest Apotheosis is the way I would go about it. Just
I would
that's
I
what
would kill
see.
I would kill your own 3/3 with the crystal power and then start popping off with spells. That's the line that I think is the
Did I just call a card Shadow Word Priest?
no crystal
I'm
power.
going crazy.
Okay, this wins too. This is the 165% line, not the 800 million% line. It's fine. Still over 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't even play the Apotheosis.
So what do you queue into Priest? And don't say Priest, because you've called this. You've made this happen.
We've seen a lot of Priest Mage recently, right? Maybe Mage is the queue? I think the game that we saw where Mage lost probably could have been won with a little bit better decision-making in the late game. So if Lucky Future feels confident enough, if World Elite feels confident enough on Mage, that might be the ideal solution. I still have to take another look. It seems like every single time I guess what they're going to queue, I get it wrong, and then I get it wrong in like the most obvious way possible. Is Lucky Future running Totem Shaman? That's a good question to ask. Totem Shaman has a very good matchup versus Priest in my mind. Yes, they are running Totem Shaman, so maybe that's it.
World Elite are running Highlander Priest, by the way. How's that going in a minute?
Yep, give me another second to find the World Elite's deck list as well, because I was looking at the wrong one by accident. Okay, World Elite is still running Totem Shaman. Lucky Future is also running Totem Shaman. But maybe Rogue as a possibility. Rogue is the deck that we were talking about before, where it has a pretty decent matchup versus Priest and doesn't have super polarized matchups.
I think their Rogue is banned. Yeah, World Elite's Rogue is banned.
Oh, excuse me.
So Rogue, their Warrior, their Warlock, their Hunter. They've got Demon Hunter available. Actually,
I'm getting absolutely everything wrong this series. I apologize about
that.
It's
good. Makes me feel better. What Demon Hunter do World Elite have? They have... Got to be careful here. They actually have real Demon Hunter.
Remember, this 3/3 has a 5/8 inside of it.
Oh, sorry, there's still a game of Hearthstone going on? I was looking at the next games.
Not for
Someone
long.
told me it was 165% certain, so I was looking in the next match.
I think it's in like the several thousands of % win rate right now. They could probably win a couple dozen games with this board. I wonder what the life total would have to be for the Druid for them to actually end up winning. I think it would be in like the multiple thousands of %. Like, I think they have to have like 2,000 life to win this game.
I've just totally left this one to you now. I'm well invested in game 2 and it hasn't even started yet. So if this goes wrong, you're going to have to explain how, because I haven't got a clue.
Well, he does
and
have
thankfully
lethal.
It hasn't gone wrong.
There is lethal in play right now, so it can't go too wrong.
You would hope. Lucky Future taking that 1-0 lead. And it's pretty important, it's the elimination match. And the losers are out, and the winners will play Invictus Gaming in that semi-final.
And yeah, I mean, the first match in LHS is very important. It's always more important to win the first match in LHS compared to Conquest, because the strategy for a lot of these lineups just kind of falters when you lose one of your decks. You know, you expect to win game 1, and then your opponents win game 2, you win game 3, they win game 4, but then, you have the counter queue for game 5. But now you're on the flip side of that. So you have to generally win an unfavorable to win the series, and that gets a lot harder. That's why we often see a lot of like 3-0s and 3-1s in LHS compared to 3-2s that we normally see in Conquest.
Yeah, it is interesting though with this format where you just expect whoever wins the first one to win everything, because you'd expect every counter deck. You've got 6 choices. How can you not have a counter? But it does turn out, and it's not just this meta. I've seen this happen in similar tournaments before. That when you get rid of the absolute top tier decks, they're top tier decks because they're meta dependent to some degree. They beat the other 6 classes. That's why they're the best decks. But the other 6 classes have this sort of equalness about them because they're all kind of floating around together at the same level. And you don't actually get the counters you think you would when you get down to those levels. It shouldn't work like that, but it seems to. There's no logical reason why that should happen.
There's still a lot of hard counters in the format, I would say.
Pick me some. Apart from Shaman versus...
One of the good things about this specific format, I know that people like to hate on Priest and hate on Mage and hate on Rogue to a certain degree, but all of those decks have a lot going on every single turn of the game. And, a lot of times some decks might actually hard counter another, but, good play and understanding what the player's position is in the matchup can overcome that. And I really do think that this specific meta of ban the best 4 decks is actually pretty skill dependent. A lot of games that we see today have been won because a player either messed up or they played brilliantly. And yeah, that does come in the flavor of Priest, of Mage, which comes with a lot of inherent randomness just due to the fact that Galakron's hero power can find a whole host of different things. Mage definitely has Puzzle Box and Astromancer Solarian, but a lot of the games are being decided by skill right now, Lorinda.
I agree entirely, and it's always the way. I'm the worst person. If you want to have somebody say it's not a skill-based game, I'm the worst person in the world to ask, I think, because I do enough of the stats and stuff to see exactly how steady the win rates are of the best players over even the second tier of really strong, grinding, qualifying players who are miles better than 99.99% of the field. Still, when those players get up to Masters Tour level, most of them struggle against the top Grandmasters. It's just a thing that happens. It is meta dependent to some degree, but even the 200th best player in the world is much underdog against the number 1 player in the world.
For sure. And when you think about top players, I think a lot of people think it's like one big secret as to why they're the top player in the world. But in my mind, a lot of times it's just, instead of being one big thing, it's a whole ton of little things. Little knowledge of interactions of things that will happen 1 in 100, 1 in 200, 1 in 1,000 games, knowing what to do in those spots, and having a bunch of corner case scenarios mapped out in advance. Generally, like when I think of a good player, obviously there is a lot of intuitive knowledge of Hearthstone. If they see a situation that they haven't been in before, they can kind of map out what's going to happen and, try to figure out a winning strategy, even though it's like an all new scenario. And you see that a lot with Priest and Mage games. There's generally board states that have never existed in Hearthstone before and will never exist again. That's just the nature of like the various random aspects of the game. However, the mark of a good player to me is also someone that has mapped out enough to know that like they're never in an uncomfortable position. They might have played an all new Priest game or an all new Mage game where something ridiculously wacky has happened. However, they've been in that similar spot before dozens of times.
I've been in this spot before dozens of times, Galen. So what would you like to talk about for the next hour and a half?
Priest versus Priest, I'll admit, is not my favorite matchup. It is probably my least favorite class to play right now against my least favorite class to play right now. However, there is a lot of decisions to be made. And I'll be first to say, I kind of suck at Galakron Priest. I'm not very good at it. But I've watched Galakron Priest players. They make a lot of decisions that I wouldn't have made, and then those decisions end up winning them the game.
I've got good news for you. There's only one Galakron Priest in this matchup. The other one is a Highlander Priest, so you can talk about that one.
That is also a Galakron Priest in my mind, which is more wacky cards. Cool. I mean, Zephyrus the Great is a strong card. I don't think it sees enough play, honestly. I think that Highlander Rogue should be the dominating rogue deck, and that Zephyrus should be in multiple more classes than it is currently in. However, that's besides the point. I'm glad to see that there's going to be at least some variation in this matchup. I do think that Zephyrus leads to a lot of very interesting scenarios, specifically with when you're normally playing Galakron Priest against itself. There really is no burst potential. You are winning with the minions on board, and that's really the only damage that you have. So a lot of the gameplay boils down to removing your opponent's stuff, playing your own stuff, and doing that for turn after turn. With Zephyrus, though, stuff like Bloodlust, Pyroblast, Fireball, Wind Fury, Doomhammer all come into play, and you actually have that burst potential in the mid game. So every single board that you develop, sure, your opponent's already planning on clearing it. However, Highlander's boards are just much more threatening.
Yes, yeah, you've got to make sure your health total stays higher as the regular Galakron. In fairness, I think Sottle summed the Priest mirror up best by saying that one every now and again is actually quite good fun. There's quite a lot to look at, quite a lot going on. It's when you have 7 in a day that it becomes a bit too tedious. So this is our one for the day. We should be good.
It reminds me a bit of Bomb Warrior matchups and Control Warrior matchups from early 2019, where we just had an oversaturation of them due to the fact that specialists kind of devolved a bit in the late stages of the metagame, where people figured out these are like the 3 best decks, and you can't move past it. But I definitely agree. Having slow control style matchups every so often is a lot of good fun.
So there's a lot of nuance to this matchup, oddly enough, despite the fact it looks like a complete raving mess by the end, usually. One of the things you can do is try and keep your hand size reasonably small. You want to look after your important cards for later, of course. But getting your hand size down to 6 or 7, for instance, so that when you get a Galacrond and you tap into a 9-drop, you don't have to waste it. So you get consistent value over the course of the game. Another thing you can do is use Apotheosis really, really wisely. Get your minions to 4 attack, which is the priest meme, but it's very valid in this matchup. Get yourself a series of 4 8s and 4 7s for your opponent to deal with, and you can be in trouble. And the other thing that's not quite so nuanced, you can have the tempo on your side for 15 turns in a row. You can really creep along, hitting your opponent, forcing them to trade into you for turn after turn. And if you can keep that rolling, you can get into a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. You just really want to try to get yourself on the front foot in this kind of matchup as much as possible, because that's where you start, being able to use your bad cards instead of having to use your good cards to fight back for board. While this game's going on, is there any very interesting cards in this Highlander Priest that you've noticed? For me, there's specifically there's 1 copy of Plague of Death,
Yes.
a copy of Siamat, a copy of Dark Prophecy, which I don't think is really going to matter too much in this kind of matchup, but it's just interesting to point out.
The Plague of Death had already caught my eye, actually, as probably the only card I found interesting. That it does mean that you get 1 chance to just stop the nonsense. But the problem is with it costing 9, the thing I was talking about a minute ago, where you constantly roll for 15 turns. Plague of Death kind of has that in mind. You roll your opponent, they Plague of Death you just play some more minions, and you're in front again.
Yep, I mean, Plague of Death costs 9 mana, and at best it just resets the board to a neutral position and passes the initiative back to your opponent. So great in some matchups, great against Druid where they have limited boards, but against something like this where, priests, if you just gave them infinite time, they could generate board after board. That's not really an issue that Priest ever has. What Priest's issues are developing, potentially awkward turns where they don't get to spend all of their mana properly. But in a matchup where you're not really having your life total threatened until very late in the stages of the game, having awkward mana really doesn't matter too much in the early game.
Yeah, Blue's used a Fate Weaver already, which made sense because he's, again, got that tempo on side. But that can become massive later on when both players have 10-card hands and he's trying to dump some cards and they all cost 7. Whereas at the moment he's getting the most out of it now. But I'll be interested to see if that doesn't work out for him later on, if he doesn't draw the other one and he ends up with a really expensive hand.
For sure. Another thing to point out is that this matchup often goes to fatigue. I can't say that with as much confidence versus Highlander Priest, but in the Galacron Priest matchup, generally you want to save off on playing Kronks because drawing cards is bad, and then also losing the ability of Kronks is doubly bad. Even though it is a 6/6 and it's just a lot of stats to put in play, you'll often see high-level Priest players just holding off on Kronks until after they get their Galacron.
Yeah, the gamers that don't go for fatigue, learn to speak, would be handy, tend to be the ones where you get an early Grave Rune generated and you just smash them.
Right.
You get a Grave Rune and they just can't kill you.
One of the few games where I was playtesting Priest for the previous Masters Tour, I believe the matchup that I won by turn 7 was because I thought steal 2 Fate Weavers from my opponent, and then the next turn I thought steal a Fate Weaver and a Disciple of Galacrond. And then I played 5 Fate Weavers by turn 7 because they made
and the game ended.
The game ended in that one, but that one doesn't happen every single time because unfortunately you just can't get 2 Fate Weavers off your Thought Steal every single game.
Another interesting thing to talk about now, the Reliquary of Souls, and it's a word I can't say, so I apologise for that in advance. You have to try and kill that the turn you play it, otherwise your opponent steals it, and the Prime is basically the best card in the matchup. So you mustn't let your opponent have it.
That's a good thing to point out. It stops. Not only does it stop fatigue, it's also just a very hard threat to answer.
yeah, it's got all of the priesty things that we talk about going in its favour. So I have cast a game where there was something like 20 of them cast, and it made me want to cry. But that's for another day, or later in this game, most likely.
Not the right target. What's funny is that all that kind of stuff where it hits the 1-2 instead of the 2-6 is you don't really feel the impact of that until like way later in the game, and you might not feel the impact of that at all. Like it could just be that next turn it's totally fine that it killed the 1-2 instead of the 2-6. You just end up taking 1 extra damage, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm. But at some point, all those little things resolve themselves. Either they did or they didn't matter, but some did and some didn't. And you get down to 2 cards each in the deck, and suddenly one of you has 12 health, and you're facing an army, and you needed 1 more health. And it's just the cumulative effect of this slow game of Hearthstone. Mainly slow because it's very hard to play more than one thing a turn. That's what makes it so slow.
Interesting to point out that Blue ended up playing his Kronk's Dragonhoof, and while I can't say that I like it, I can at least see the justification. He still wants to play for tempo as much as possible, and this is easily the best way of doing that. Having Galakron online also is a decent thing to have, but I'm not sure how I feel about it at the end of the day.
I'm not sure I'm happy with this Soul Mirror either. It's a very, very early use of it.
Do you think it's because he's Highlander Priest, so he has access to a lot of different tools, and maybe...
Yeah.
It was a pretty threatening board, and he does get 2 very good minions. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I mean, it's not the worst Soul Mirror. It's not like a stupid move or anything. I'm not happy with it. But like you say, with him being Highlander, having a little bit more access, that's probably the reason. I do see the top players holding off on their Galacrons more than I would. My instinct in this matchup would be to jam Galacron and start generating cards as quickly as possible, but they put a bit more store than I would in getting it up, at least on the side of the regular Galacron Priest, getting it up to the top level before playing it, getting that weapon.
For sure. I think that it's just a resource battle after a certain point. If you can just play for tempo instead of having to commit that Galacron, that's generally a better strategy because, killing 4 minions from your opponent and developing a weapon that kills 2 more minions is just like an overwhelming amount of resources. So if you can hold off on it and not really sacrifice too much in your game plan, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Tell you what makes a lot of sense here for me is if I was Yuansu and I think I can survive this onslaught, I want to play this Madame Lazul. I know there's a Galacron in my opponent's hand. I just want to steal it.
Pretty interesting turn. You're hoping to hit the 8/8. That's unfortunate.
Interesting he goes for Thought Steal rather than Lazul here. I guess he knows that Blue's not going to play Galacron, so why hurry it? Blue might empty his hand even more.
The 1/3 gets played.
Interesting. I don't think that's the thing you should do.
If Blue wants to steal it, he does have the opportunity to. He can go Shadow Madness, then attack into the 2/1, and then Breath of the Infinite and push 8 damage. And then follow up with Madame Lazul.
Exactly what he's doing, getting that prime into his deck. And that's an error for me for Yuansu. The other things were my opinion. This, I think, is a straight-up mistake.
For sure. Ends up taking the Renew instead of the Zephyrus. Maybe... Okay, so I definitely do not understand this matchup at a high enough level to say this for certain. But is there a world where, taking Zephyrus instead and just assuming that you're going to be at, 5 cards left in deck, is that a higher percentage line? Zephyrus is a really powerful tool when it's active.
I'm with you on every single word you just said. It feels to me like that's what you should do, but I also get the impression Blue's played this deck a few times. He seems incredibly comfortable piloting it.
Also, this is pretty disgusting. The Madame Lazul found the Galacron, and he had the Invoke at the very end. So that was really good sequencing from Blue's perspective to just get that 4th Invoke. If he had played the timer at first, this would have just been Galacron on 3 Invokes. Just something to point out.
Mm-hmm. He's setting up this... Well, he has set up this crazy turn.
I imagine the Renew was probably going to come out here as well. Okay, sure.
Notice how his instinct was to protect, even though the order, even though it didn't matter, he was always playing on both, was to make the 4/6 first. That's kind of the priest mirror instinct, is to make the 4 attack minion. So he did that one in case he changed his mind when he got the extra card.
Yonsu got another Soul Mirror. That's going to be pretty massive, potentially. Unfortunately, it does not do much here. Galakrond is a full clear, but then you're kind of using it for less than max value. You might still end up doing it just because you get to take back board with the Volpera Scoundrel or the Breath of the Infinite if you wanted to. Oh, so he's just using Breath of the Infinite here to save a charge on the weapon instead of developing the Volpera Scoundrel. That's pretty interesting. I don't know if I like it. I kind of like developing the minion instead.
The problem with the Scoundrel is it doesn't make space in your hand. I think he's trying to dump a couple of cards now he's got into hero power mode.
Alright.
Because his hand size is actually tiny right now. He doesn't want to play Soul Mirror. He doesn't want to play Zephyrus. Doesn't want to play Kronks. So his maximum hand size is kind of 7 right now.
Sure, but at the same time, he's going to want to have to dump this Volpera Scoundrel at some point, and he's going to have to commit that 3 mana anyways.
But he's doing it now on a 10 mana turn where he can get rid of the cards on the same turn like this.
Yeah, but he could have got... I mean, he would have just had a Breath of the Infinite here and clear off a 3-1 and a 3-2 would have been equally good. I know that's pretty results-oriented because you can't say there's a Psychopomp coming down, but I don't think the order necessarily mattered too much for that.
Okay. He's actually struggling to dump cards. Everything he plays just draws more cards. I think he played 5 cards that turn and got rid of 1 card from his hand.
I mean, that's just Priest in a nutshell, right? Like, everything is a value engine. There's Renew is a value engine. All of the Invoke cards are value engines. Luzul is a value engine. I think Priest is probably on the far end of the spectrum in terms of cards created. And then a little bit behind them are Rogues. Rogues definitely have a lot of value generation, but they don't pump out the same amount of resources as Priest. Generally because the cards they create are 1 mana lackeys rather than, 7 mana Soul Mirrors or 8 mana Morozons.
Yeah. Like, do you create a lot of them, though? Like, Priest tends not to be able to play more than 1 or 2 of their generated cards a turn, which can lead to them just not playing them if they're playing not a mirror. Obviously, if you're playing a mirror, everyone plays all their generated cards, and that's what takes so long.
They're suffering from success.
Suffering from success. Suffering from all these 7 mana cards.
Why is the Fate Weaver green for you as well?
Fate Weaver is nothing because it's the other player's turn now.
Sure. But it seems like it had a green border around it. It might just be a visual bug. However...
No, it probably does. It's a Highlander priest, so why wouldn't it? So the Galakron you steal...
Right, so even though he's a fully invoked Galakron... Okay, so this is an interaction that I was actually unaware of. Even though he's played a fully invoked Galakron, the Fate Weaver is still not active. That's good to know. Because doesn't it say after you've invoked twice?
Yes. But he hasn't invoked twice, he's only invoked once, but it was enough. I think it was once. I think he buffed his opponent's final Galakron. Because if you look at blues, you've got the icon on the bottom of the screen showing it's level 2 still. So Yuansu stole the level 2 Galakron from blue's deck, buffed it once, and then stuck it on the board as a top level. Whereas blue, who's got more invokes in his deck, can't get the 3rd invoke, or the 4th invoke.
That's just like a really funny interaction that I've actually never seen before. So that's good to know. All right, Blue's hand is garbage. These cards all suck. Galakron is good, but that's just not good enough, right?
I mean, doesn't Blue now have to just... He's held onto this card for how long? This Galakron that he could have made about 12 cards with. And now I think it's time to... Yeah, this is the look of a man who knows he doesn't want to play this Galakron. He knows he's going to draw the Invoke card next turn. And he's going to play Galakron tap into a minion he doesn't want and top deck and invoke. That's exactly how this is going to go down.
It's just a very awkward turn. Sad. I think it is the right play. Just does not feel good to have to do this. The weapon is a really critical resource.
I was wrong about tapping into a card he didn't want. He actually got a really good card with Natalie Sleen there.
Another Reliquary of Souls. So Yuanza has to be careful, right? Because
He does.
well, okay, I might be wrong. I think that blue might have stolen the first copy of Reliquary Prime. But just have to be careful that if you generate multiple of these and stick them into your deck, that Zephyrus gets shut off.
Oh, I see what you mean. So I thought you were going to say he has to be careful because he already fed one to his opponent.
Well, that too.
But yeah. But yes, you're right. You don't want to put 2 of these in your deck and forget that you've done it. That would be bad.
Mind Games is decently interesting if it does get to that very late game where people are sticking Reliquary Souls back into their deck. It's just a 4-mana Reliquary Prime. He ends up taking Mind Games. This is like way far in the future, and it could just be because it's a 4-mana minion, but just want to point that out.
It makes it more interesting though that like he's willing to plan that far in the future with his Mind Games, but wasn't willing to take the Zephyrus.
Yeah,
when he had.
I do think not taking the Zephyrus was a pretty big error. Reliquary Prime found. This is almost certainly a Natalie Sleen turn. Death does get the job done, but this is very clean.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest threats in your opponent's deck. There's one of the others. Now, this is the part of the Priest Mirror I really actually enjoy, where nobody's got a clear advantage, and nobody can play their cards because they all add up to more than 10. Like lots of 7s and 4s, and ugh. And I like to see the player who navigates that the best and gets the most taps in is the one who's going to get the most value in this game, and should come out the winner.
For sure. A really big thing about this turn specifically is that the Fate Weaver is now active. He can reduce the card of everything in his hand. Like if he wants to set up this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, so that's 8 mana, and he can play the dragons next turn alongside it, he can do that.
Blue has the information there's a Morazond in his opponent's deck, which is actually useful if he wants to Soul Mirror, if anything comes up.
Fate Weaver first allows for hero power alongside the Shadow Word Death and Escape Mana Saver. Just looking at this hand, that seems like the obvious play to me, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about way back on turn 4 when Blue tried to attack him with Fate Weavers for lethal damage. This is how you want to use your Fate Weavers. I'm not saying that he could have resisted that, because I think he's played really well up since then, trying to get the most out of other cards, but you see the difference it makes now, how many cards Yuansu can actually play in a turn compared to Blue, because he hasn't got the Fate Weaver.
For sure. And I mean, Yuansu's hand is getting really high quality at this point. You know, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Zephyrus, and Kronks on hand with a Soul Mirror backup. Not to detract from Blue's hand either. There's a lot of strong cards here as well. It's hard to compete quality-wise with DQA, with Zephyrus, with Kronks.
And an 8-mana DQA just about unnerfs it, basically. Means you can play it all in one turn. So that's fine.
That 1-mana nerf on Dragon Queen actually really hurt the card, by the way. You know, a lot of Highlander hunters, for example, no longer play Dragon Queen Alexstrasza because it's just too slow.
Yeah, when I saw the nerf, I thought, okay, well, that does nothing. But I was wrong, because it's really grim.
It turns it from a 9-mana 24/24 to a 9-mana 8/8.
Yeah, okay.
Is how I think about it, which is a lot. You know, that's 16 in stats lost.
It's a lot of stats.
Is there anything interesting here with Scarlet Subjugator? It doesn't seem like it. If he managed to generate another Scarlet Subjugator, then the Zephyrus may offer Mind Control in the 6/8. I'm not sure how relevant that would be.
Okay.
Mind Control, Cabal Shadow Priest. What am I saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you... Sorry, I called Cabal Shadow Priest Shadow Word Priest earlier, so we're both going well on that card. Something he can plan for later is to get this Plague of Death down, and then play all the bits of the Alexstrasza, the 1-mana cards, the turn after, or the same turn.
Really
if
good
he hasn't
use.
just got
Yeah.
something nutty here.
That was a really good use of Rusted Raider. There's a 0-mana Zephrys. I haven't really played with this cheap of a Zephrys this late in the game. I have a lot of experience Shadow Stepping Zephrys, but those games tend to end pretty quickly. Turn 4, turn 5. You're playing an Edwin as a Highlander Rogue, so this is like a very different situation. One thing to keep in mind is that this Zephrys is threatening Bloodlust lethals. Yuansu managed to make a very threatening board with very bad cards. He used Rusted Raider, Escape Mana Saver, Lightwell, among others. Scarlet Subjugator. Oh, that's huge, right?
Yeah. That's
big.
Right?
That's really big.
So there, you're saying that's huge because of fatigue, I assume, as well as the fact it's just a good card.
It's just huge. One's a 7/5 and one's an 8/8. Those are big minions.
So next turn, whatever blue does here, Yuansu has the opportunity to Plague of Death and drop one of these minions.
He could even tank the turn this turn and then go Plague of Death both minions the following turn. I don't really know if I would like that. I think that Onyxia kind of gets the job done by itself. But
yeah,
there are a wealth of options available. And you can see how powerful Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is in a matchup like this. Generally, it's very hard to generate one in the Priest mirror. So the Highlander Priest just has a natural advantage in the late game.
Yeah, and it got all the good stuff. I mean, it got the Galakon weapon when the other deck didn't, using its own Galakon, for instance. And blue just hasn't generated much this game. I do feel that he did get the bonus prime that he wasn't really entitled to. But other than that, I think Yuansu's kept his cards pretty well in line. He's kept his hand size as low as he dare all the time.
This seems like the first turn where blue is going to start taking meaningful damage. Oh, never mind. This is the turn that he Soul Mirrors.
But this is meaningful damage. He's lost a Soul Mirror now.
Sure.
Like this is a meaningful move on the game. Although he does get the Waxadread, so that's a big deal. It sort of just completely mitigates the opponent getting one. Wow.
Well, that's a good draw. That's a good one.
Blue just stared at the screen and blinked then, and then that's it. He just stopped moving.
Mind Flayer Karj probably is supposed to save that. Onyxia can come down. A Hero Power could come out. Apotheosis could stick if you really wanted to, from Yuansu's perspective. Would you trade a Hero Power or an Apotheosis in hand for one in play and a Hero Power? I think is the last question to ask this turn.
I don't think you want one in play because you don't get to any key numbers. You don't make a 4-attack minion, so I don't want it out of my hand yet.
Seems reasonable.
That 4-attack meme gets stronger as the game goes on. Obviously, it's first there's time rips and stuff that can deal with it, but later on, a 4/8 is just really difficult to deal with.
Not a bad one to pick up.
How? Oh, Plague of Death resolves this. Well, I was going to say, how are they going to deal with these Waxadreads? But Plague of Death's going to resolve it in the end.
If Yuansu is feeling really threatened for that, he could just trade the 7/4 and then Plague. But I don't want to Plague this turn. I think it's way more important to
yeah,
play for Tendo. I'm sure that's not what you meant. I'm sorry if I.
That's fine. No, I meant he would just do it. That's how he would resolve it if it became a thing later on.
Gotcha.
So he'll keep the Plague of Death with that eventuality in mind, I think.
Double Mind Flayer on the 7/4 seems pretty sweet.
It does. It really does. This is do-it-yourself Ysera.
A lot of Waxadreads could come out in this game. There's the opportunity to Soul Mirror as well, a Waxadread. If blue develops a Soul Mirror and then he pops the Mind Flayer Karjas, then more Waxadreads will pop out.
And this is the fun bit of Priest Mirrors. If we could start on this turn, knowing what cards are gone every time, I would love every Priest Mirror ever, because this is where it gets fun.
Yep. Okay, we're at quad Waxadread territory now.
Mm-hmm. And pretty soon we won't have a clue how many Waxadreads there are, I think. We've hit that part of the curve where it's no longer possible to keep track of how many Waxadreads are going in and out of the deck.
They're just at the top of the deck.
I mean, the deck is only about 5 cards thick, so that's allowed.
Thoughtsteel finds Reliquary Prime sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Those are yucky cards.
Apparently it never finds Waxadread, which is interesting. There we go.
I need to refresh my my knowledge of this. If you play a cast when drawn spell from hand, does it draw a card still? This is something that I remember. When I had to remember it, I did, but it's been a while since this has really been active.
I used to know this, and I don't know. I'm going to go with no. But that's a guess.
I think it's a no. I'm not positive on that, but I believe
actually says something when drawn on it.
Casts when drawn.
Casts when drawn, so that doesn't help. But nowhere on the card does it say draw a card. That's my guess, and I'm not claiming to be an authority on that particular mechanic, because I'm definitely not one.
It's not really expected that a cast when draw a spell ends up in hand. The game has to get like pretty crazy for that to happen.
I mean, this game is pretty crazy. It's a fair call.
Murazan summons... I don't even remember at this point. I'm so sorry.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm just glad he hadn't cast the 5-mana spell the turn before the Moazond.
Another Fate Weaver? That's actually getting kind of ridiculous at this point.
We also actually are just missing the fact that... Well, not missing it. We're not conveying the fact that Yuansu's just winning this now.
Oh, yeah. Yuansu has so won this game. I'm sorry for not saying that in the past. He has his Zephyrus. He's got 2 Waxadreads in play. I think he's got another 2 in deck right now. He's got Waxadread, he's got Kronks, he's got Zephyrus, he has Plague of Death if the situation ever gets scary. There was a Plague of Ruins, or the Shadow Word Ruins. Now my entire statement is now moot, and we're back to casting this game. Good job, Lorinda. Thank you.
But so where I was going with that is, as it gets burned, Yuansu has been ahead by a long way at the end of each of his turns, and each turn Blue is having to find more and more clumsy ways of dealing with the board, and I don't think that pattern is going to stop for a few more turns yet.
Sure, I mean he had to rely on getting a Shadow Word Rune there. His answers have gone from Soul Mirror to Reliquary of Souls, and hoping that works out.
Right, exactly. So that's where I was going with it. It's not that he's dead this turn, or even next turn, or even in 3 or 4 turns. Probably it's just that this is going to run out for him almost certainly.
Not a bad 2-drop. Another card comes down. Nearly infinite amounts of Waxadreads.
He's even losing by 4 health. I haven't looked at the health total for
Another
about 20
candle.
turns. That's great. You know the best thing about this is last hero standing. We get to see Priest again next game.
Oh yeah, and potentially the game after that as well. We're at 1-0
and you know what people
right
queue
now.
into Priest? You know what people always queue into Priest? Oh, sure you do. They always queue Rogue into Priest, Galen.
Well, we've seen some mages as well.
And the side
Mind
that has
control.
Rogue banned is World Elite, and they're the side that's going to win. So we're going to see Rogue versus Priest. Oh yeah, and then we get to see Mage versus Priest. Cool, that's another quickie. Some crazy games going to be coming up before we know who's playing in that semi-final, that's for sure.
The good news is that at the end of this, at least one player is going to be Waxed Dead, so we have that to look forward to.
I'll give you that one. I don't know how long you'd held on to it, but the timing was fine. We'll give you it.
Thanks. It was supposed to be a solid like C+ tier joke.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he steals the Waxadread! Why wouldn't it?
You may have called this too early, and he gets a Soul Mirror. There's literally infinite Waxadreads this game.
I may have called it too early. I think you're probably right.
Okay.
Until that Plague of Death gone, I refuse to believe that Yuansu is in trouble.
Worst comes to worst, the Plague of Death can come down. I really don't want that.
Murazond, her.
A generated Murazond is insane. I don't know if it should be cast this turn. Yeah, Aeon Reaver makes a lot more sense.
Oh.
Is there a world where you're supposed to trade off your 3/3 and penance instead of using your weapon to swing? I think the answer is yes.
I'll let you answer your own question on that one. I haven't got a clue anymore. So there's 4 cards versus 3 in both decks. I'm pretty sure they're almost all Wax Dreads. There may be one other card lurking in there that doesn't belong.
For sure. In my mind, the weapon is a 0 mana deal 5 damage, and the penance is 1 mana deal 3 damage, and generally 0 mana deal 5 is better than a 1 mana deal 3.
Got to make space to draw his Wax Dreads or you'll burn them, though. Which is what keeps happening to blue. What's happening, Gala? How did we get to this position?
What's funny is that hasn't really gotten like super haywire because both players have just been overdrawing all of the candles. If both players had 9 cards right now, this game would be a lot more wacky than it currently is. But I think with this next 2 turns, we're going to see a boatload of 7/5s come out.
Yup.
1.
Uh-huh.
2.
There we go.
Just
I know how
2.
you can lose this game really quickly is play Plague of Death now.
That is one solution to make the game go faster. I would not recommend it, though. Double Murazond in hand. Another Murazond has been generated. Waxadread in play. Let's go. Penance does not do too much here. Shadow Word Death clears a 7/5. If Topsy Turvy was still in the pool of spells, you go, Penance, Topsy Turvy, steal another Wax Dread. I don't know why I'm saying this. That adds nothing to the conversation, like many comments that I make. But that being said, beyond Shadow Word Death, I don't really see how blue answers this board.
Tap Natalie Slane, go. Oh well, Sethek into a couple of deaths. That'll be fine. How do you?
I don't even know what to say here. All right,
just get another.
This is not the time to play a Sethek Bellweaver. You need more than 10 seconds, bud.
That's a good point.
Oh my god, the animations. This is going to be impossible. Silence. Yes, that's a great card. Play your cards. Excellent. Shadow Madness. Can he get it off? This is a full clear.
Did he get there?
He did.
Okay, that was good. He did some things.
And another Shadow Word Death. That was like a pretty optimal sequence of how things could have happened. Are the last 2 cards... There we go.
Hang on. Let me just use my crystal ball. In fact, I'm going to use an 8 ball, I think, for this one. What are the last 4 cards? 8 ball says yes. There you go.
That's a pretty interesting answer.
Well, there's 2 Murazons.
What the heck?
I'm going to just name the cards now. Oh, he's been saving on this Kronks forever. Look at all that damage it can do. Absolutely.
Murazond hopefully will not hit the 7/5 with the silence. Don't do it. Oh. That's a great steal. Shadow Word Death on your own Murazond. Oh. We saw that before. I think it was IGXC. Murazonded during a time rip turn. Still ended up winning that game, though, so hopefully that is good news for Yuan Su.
XC's played 6 games. He's won them all with Priest.
Just not killing the Waxadread.
Priest up in the semi-final.
It kind of makes sense not to kill the Waxadread, right? You really want to...
Yeah, it doesn't achieve anything.
Death. Sure. So from Blue's perspective, he wants to kill the 7/5s so that he can actually keep up with Yuan Su in the late game if he is keeping track of this Plague of Death.
When's the late game if it's not now?
We're in the early game right now, Lorinda. We're about a quarter of the way through this priest mirror.
How do you know? How many turns are there? I haven't got a clue. It must be about 35.
Probably a bit less than that. I guess high 20s.
Okay.
Maybe like 25, 26. Because we just hit fatigue. There was one card that was shuffled in. Probably like 26, 27.
Big deal there. The fact they've now both got this Plague of Death, obviously. And I definitely called this one too early because Blue is now in front. Because he can Plague of Death the last Murazons. Or the last, whatever these things are called. Waxadreads.
He really wished that he could trade off these Waxadreads, then Plague of Death, but I don't think that's really going to be able to happen. If the last cards in blue stacks are both Waxadread Candles, there might be a better solution to this board state, but I really don't see it.
One of them is a Prime and one's a Candle, I think.
Is Zephyrus an option here?
What do you take? What are you looking for? You're only 11 off lethal.
That's a good question, Lorinda.
Is it one off lethal with Pyro off Zephyrus?
Yeah, it's literally just one off lethal. We're not even doing the Zephyrus map. Holy cow.
Just almost lethal.
Wait. This just pulls the 7/5. This is insanely smart. What the heck? I've never seen this interaction before. He's playing the Cleric of Scales to get the Waxadreads out now instead of the next turn. Oh my god. This is crazy. Okay, forget everything I just said about this matchup. This specific play, the Cleric of Scales to draw the Waxadread Scandal, is something that I would never have pieced together in a million years. That is genius. That is so sick. That is like exactly what I was talking about in the first stages of this game, where we were talking about how players can think about, the 1 in a million edge case scenarios, and this is one of them, where you have a Waxadread and a Cleric of Scales in hand, with a Dragon in hand as well.
And you know the interaction.
And then he just there's a Plague of Death as well. What the... Was the Plague of Death in hand? Where did that come from? I didn't even...
Yeah, I did mention that a while ago, which is, he just appeared.
There's so, I gotta see both hands. I'm still forgetting so many crucial aspects of this game. Meanwhile, Yuansu and Blue both are doing everything right. If Yuansu still loses this game, I just want to highlight the fact that last play of the Cleric of Scales was genius. That was, really smart.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing that if you discover it, it counts as drawn rather than discovered is something, as he steals another Waxadread, so it's not over yet. How did we get here? I say this every Priest Mirror, but how did we get here?
There's still more Waxadreads that can come out. The Mind Flayer Karj in Blue's hand is another one if he really wants it. It's getting a bit awkward, though. You don't really want to develop the... Sure. This has to
One thing that I think Blue has done, I think, is he's managed to tap a little bit more than his opponent. He's managed to hero power slightly more often.
He's got more resources, yeah. I mean, Yuansu, just naturally, because he was playing Highlander Priest, I think had the resource advantage in the late game. So that means, in my mind, that Blue probably... I think you're right. Blue definitely squeezed out a bit more of his resources in the late game. And you have to remember that Blue, when he played his Galakron, it was not fully invoked. He did not have access to that weapon swing that we still see Yuansu has in hand right now. Or in claw right now.
But now he's forced to just try and sell. I think, do you have to Apotheosis or can you get away with it?
If you're keeping really good track of Blue's hand right now, you really can't get a read on Blue's hand.
I was going to say, if you're keeping really good track of his hand, you know none of the cards. You know the Prime.
That's pretty fair. You know the Shield of Galakron, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe even that one is generated.
We're watching both sides and we don't know. What chances has Yuansu got?
He goes for the Apotheosis, decides that is the only way to stay alive. Any interest in starting with a button? Because if you get Natalie Celine, you just win the game.
You just have to check you can afford it, but it looks like you can afford it with all the 7s in hand.
The difference would be if you play the Reliquary Prime, you also get to play the Mind Flayer Karj on a minion. I'd be interested to see where this lands. I don't think the game lasts much longer. I'm not sure if Waxadred is the right pick. It seems like Murazan is totally out of the question. I think that's going to be the debate right now. I don't think he ever clicks the button. I imagine from Blue's perspective, it's going to be Mind Flayer Karj plus Reliquary Prime, and then the only choice there is the 7/5 or the 6/12.
Yeah, he's constantly having to check himself to make sure his cards can't get stolen as well. They can't, I don't think, but
Okay,
that's easy for us to say, right?
The Reliquary did not come down. Another Skeletal Drake. I mean, how do you feel about not playing the Reliquary? Do you think he's worried about something like a Solmir?
No, I think he's trying to force the known Plague of Death.
Sure. I mean, well, even if a Plague of Death came down, Yuansu's at 3 life right now, and he's taking 6 the next turn. I believe...
Which is fine, then it's checkmate, right?
I believe this is checkmate. I could be wrong on that.
I've believed it's checkmate about 3 different directions so far.
Three's a pretty low estimate. You gotta hit some minions. You gotta play some spells. He manages to find a way to go face here, which is really impressive. We still have not determined who's going to win this game.
I'm just letting you talk and I'm staring at the screen. I haven't got a clue who's going to win. I keep thinking I've added it up and then I just haven't.
The weapon goes face. I really like that play. We might start seeing where not playing the Reliquary Prime last turn is going to cost Blue some critical resources. A lackey here for a spell.
Oh.
I don't think... You know what, I'm just going to cut it off right there. I don't think. That's the entire phrase that I'm going to say.
He gets a minion now. Yeah, that's it.
The extra life here is going to be really impactful. Can any of these minions go face? Is there a way to kill the 6/8 and go face for 7 or 8? It doesn't matter. Is there a way to go face for 2? 2 damage. That's all we're asking for right now.
From either player, basically. Can anyone hit anyone? Or is it Emerald Explorer into trade into now you can't hit me, lol?
Well, the problem is that he's at 5 life.
Blue's only at 6.
Yeah, but Blue doesn't die, and Yuansu does.
Well,
yeah, 6 minus 4 is 2. 5 minus 6 is -1.
Generate something good, quick.
That's the line.
But do you generate it with a dragon, or do you
Emerald
generate
Explorer
it with a generator?
for a dragon would be Brightwing into a 1-mana legendary.
Oh, Natalie's lethal, right? No, it's not.
Natalie Celine does not do it, I believe. Actually, no. Does Natalie Celine? Natalie Celine is 1 off.
Which is lethal because reasons.
No, I don't think it's lethal.
Shadowy Figure could have been played on his own thingy there.
I imagine that he wants to do this, hope Blue messes up.
Better.
I don't really see the line that wins here. He's going to die.
He only has to do 1 damage. That was 5 fatigue. Just pointing that out.
6 damage is coming the next turn, unless Yuansu has an amazing green hero power, which he does not. -1 life. Losing with the Highlander Priest after we said that it was all but over. A timely Shadow Word Ruin in the very late stages of the game to clear off the 10 million Waxadreds. Buys Blue the win.
They've lost a caster. The Chinese caster. They had 3 at the start of that game, and one of them's aged. Now they're down to 2.
I mean,
what do you reckon, Galen? What happened?
You know, that series was probably long enough where, you know, we could have some new casters join the ranks. You know, they were born, and now they're probably around 22 years old, ready to cast again.
That reminds me of one of the adverts they used to have, but I'll tell you about that later. Let's go for a quick break to try and regain our sanity, and then we'll get into game number 3 in this 1-all match to see who goes to the semi-final. Lucky Future are 1 game away from the semi-finals, and if they get there, they will be playing against IG. But probably a long way to go yet. We've seen Priests, they do okay, but there's plenty of decks you can line up against them to get rid of them.
You say that, but we've seen a lot of Priest dominance in this tournament. IG is 6-0 right now with Priest, and right now Blue is currently up 2-0. Sure, he had a little bit of a struggle against Tice's Druid hand at the start of the day, but that was a pretty insane Druid hand. And against a lot less powerful, a lot less high-rolled hands, it's been doing really well. So, this could be a quick 3-0. Well, quick, relatively speaking, in terms of
relative
to
3-1
or games played. Before we get into that, I do want to mention really quickly that there is a new patch coming out for Hearthstone featuring a new Battlegrounds hero, Mr. Bigglesworth, the Kel'Thuzad's cat, and a couple new minions that benefit the Menagerie archetype. Now, the players in the Gold Club World Cup for Battlegrounds are going to be playing on the old patch. So that new hero and those new cards will not be part of this tournament. However, if you want to log in, I believe that expansion drops relatively soon, and you get to play with the new hero as soon as that patch drops. So, cool thing to check out if you're a Battlegrounds fan. But after that, we do have this match to play. We are currently up 2-0 with Lucky Future in a commanding lead, I have to say.
2-0, always good, really, in last hero standing. You've lost your... Well, when your counter queue is the mirror, you're not in a good spot anyway, lineup-wise, surely. With
Sure
6 to choose from, why is your counter queue the mirror? And I've wondered that all week. It's not like something that's gone wrong here. We have seen priest into priest or mage into mage being the counter queue, which makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about it being Highlander priest rather than Galacron priest and having a natural edge there. They just didn't manage to find it. But another important thing to note about this tournament is that when you are up 2-0, I think you actually have a much stronger chance against your opponent than a normal LHS format. Because you have 5 decks to choose from, you can just choose the 2 out of 5 that have the best matchup, rather than just having to queue your remaining 2 decks if you lose. So I think that compared to a normal LHS, being up 2-0 in a 6-deck format is way stronger.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm just looking here at Ulov's pretty impressive hexagon, to be perfectly honest.
Yep, I mean,
earlier. But yeah, like whatever happens here, should the mage win, which it won't, because it never beats priest. I don't care that it's 49% or whatever on this graphic.
Yeah, I mean, Ulov has been around for a while. He was playing Hearthstone tournaments in 2016. I think that's the first time the name popped up. But you know, we don't really get a lot of exposure to him on the Western broadcast. And I keep trying to hammer that point home, where like a lot of these names seem relatively new to us, but they've actually been very established names in the Chinese Hearthstone scene.
Yeah, Ulov in particular has a little bit of a place in my heart, as it were, because when I used to cast the old Team Story events with very few viewers, and people just didn't watch the Chinese scene at all over here, that's changed a lot since then. Ulov was plugging away even back then, and that's why I am quite happy to see that he's come along a long way since then. Like this last year in particular, he has been very, very solid. And again, seeing this hexagon where his micro skills are weak does tell me a little bit. I mentioned this earlier again, but it's a long time ago. It does tell me that maybe we were too harsh to judge, and maybe he just makes mistakes, but is actually really, really good at the game.
For sure. Yeah, I again, the exposure to people is really a large part of what makes people think they're good. If you only have 1 game or 2 of a player and they play very well, you're like, oh, that's a name to keep track of, not, oh, this player is one of the best in the game, even if they potentially could be. And getting exposure, I think, is half of the battle. Like playing well is half of it, and then getting exposure and getting your name out there is the other half of like being established in the pro Hearthstone scene.
Yeah, imagine if you'd only seen Taro played twice. Like he punted half of his games he ever played, and he was brilliant at Hearthstone. But there'd be a 50% chance you thought he was rubbish because he would have done something like blow his own board up, or shoot his own face when on 1 health or something.
That's an especially funny name to mention, because Tare is someone that I think he was a very fantastic Hearthstone player, but also a pretty soft-spoken individual, and didn't really seek the Hearthstone limelight, if you will. When he won a tournament, he would post 1 tweet about it and then go radio silent for a couple more months afterwards. And he kind of falls victim to the same thing where, when you mention the name Tare, pro players are going to be like, yeah, Tare was a fantastic player. But for the casual viewer at home, who's Tare? If that makes sense. Especially to people that are pretty recent to the Hearthstone scene. So,
yeah, he was a player that just messed up a lot of times. He still won anyway. That's how good he was. But he was a player that, if you were watching him and you saw him once or twice, you go, okay, well that guy's rubbish. There's better examples as well, but better players who played worse. But I don't really want to go into that too much because I like to watch good players playing well.
For sure.
But it just turns out that nobody plays perfectly, no matter how good they are.
That's definitely true. There have been a couple times when I've been watching Hearthstone broadcasts where a player I've never heard about surprises me and really impresses me. One of the names this is totally random, but one of the names that really impressed me that I've never seen again was Zump.
You got to say,
okay. Zump with 2 Ps. He played the European playoffs at one point. I don't think he plays Hearthstone anymore, but
he won a DreamHack.
That doesn't surprise me. He was a very good player.
And he came top 8 in the next DreamHack, and then we never saw him again.
Yeah, he just stopped playing for some reason. But I was like, oh, this guy's really good. And generally when I watch Hearthstone players, it's like, oh, they're pretty good. or if I watch someone that like I've seen a lot of, they're like, oh, yeah, they're playing really well right now. But it's pretty unusual to see a name that you've never seen before pop up and they're just playing, lights out Hearthstone. Because if they are playing lights out Hearthstone, you're probably seen their name before because they would have won more than they have currently. So I don't know. It's a weird dynamic there.
I mean, Chloe, she made a top 16 at DreamHack, and we never saw her before or again.
Right.
And everyone was saying, like, she's great. We're going to see more of her. She's going to win things. And never saw her before that tournament. Never seen her since. She just turned up. Presumably, I don't even know, but presumably because it's her local event and she just wanted to play some Hearthstone because that's what she does. And then just vanished again.
That's what I think. I remember being pretty impressed by her play. I think that she was local to the to Texas region, but it is pretty interesting to see like the hidden bosses in certain Hearthstone tournaments, especially with like the DreamHack series, where you'll have like 50 to 100 people just come out from the local community, and then one or two of them will be really good Hearthstone players. So yeah, it is always cool to see those people pop up.
And we see that now, of course, in Masters Tour qualifiers. Obviously, it's a little bit different because they're going to be decent because they've won a qualifier. They're not going to be bad. They might be mediocre occasionally, but in general, they're going to be super players. But yeah, the old travelling around, bumping into players was good. However, we're getting a little bit off topic, I guess. We've just had a priest mirror, so we needed 10 minutes of chatter to get ourselves back into Hearthstone. But we are going to get the mage versus the priest. Do you think I'm being too harsh on mage in this matchup? Do you think it actually is closer to 50-50, or do you think I'm right and the priest is just going to keep winning?
I already said how I feel about this, but I'll repeat it. I think that a lot of it is player skill based. I think that if you have a much better mage player than the priest player, the mage is going to win handily, and if you have a much better priest player than the mage player, the priest is going to win handily. The matchup that we saw with Yu Ying versus Casey, Yu Ying did end up winning, but it was by the slimmest margins. It was by the slimmest margins, and I think if he had played it better, it would not have been even close to winning. Casey, on the other hand, played great, and with a little bit of variance going his way instead of Yu Ying's way, I could have easily seen Casey winning that game that he had no business winning in the end game. So I still chalk it up to who the better player is probably going to win more.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will get to find out in a moment, I think. I'm curious to see how the mage goes about it. I'm going to stick to my assertion that the mage likes to save direct damage because it struggles to build a sticky board that stays long enough to kill the priest. Obviously it can, and obviously it will sometimes, but in general I think he likes to have the fireball or whatever in hand to strike the finishing blow.
For sure. We kind of saw the game plan coming together for Yu Ying that last game, and if he had capitalized on it, it would have made a lot of sense. Unfortunately, that's not what happened, but I definitely see your point, where the burn strategy of trying to bait out the opponent's apotheosis, assembling some form of burn in the form of fireball and frostbolt, and just Alex draws them in the face seems like a really reasonable way to win.
So, the winners of this do go to the semi-finals. Have you seen the format for the semi-finals?
I have been focusing on the day 1 and day 2, so I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to talk about it if you have it in front of you.
Just give me 1 second. I want to just double check that I'm correct. As I understand it, okay, so let's take this as a 99% certain. I haven't checked the rulebook since the start of the show, and I've just done a pre-mirror. The semi-finals are best of 3, best of 5s.
Oh, wow. So you have to win 2 best. So we could technically have a 15-game series between 2 players.
Yes.
And then would the finals be the same, or does that go back to
the finals? I don't actually. I haven't even seen how the finals work. I'm assuming it's the same, but the finals seems to be set up differently. I'm not sure.
It would be
as I understand it, the semi-finals are.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think the finals. The only thing that could be different is maybe it's even longer, but because China do things quite magnificently at times. But I think the finals will be the same as the semi-finals.
For sure. Yeah, it seems weird to go from best of 3, best of 5 for the semis, and then just go back to 1 match for the finals.
It'll be at least best of 3, best of 5 for the final. That's the only question in my mind is whether they just decide to play all day.
For sure.
Hey, you say that. I cast a tournament in China once because Chinese tournaments don't get bound by the same things ours do, production-wise. So I saw a Chinese tournament once where 4th place would qualify for a championships or for worlds or whatever it was, and there was a 5-way tie. So their solution was to play a 5-way round robin the next day, like all 15 games or whatever that is, 10 games.
That is pretty funny. I mean, so that's like a pretty interesting thing to talk about, which is that for a very long time, I feel like Chinese tournaments were more about putting on a show rather than a competition in some regards. And I mean, like a lot of Hearthstone tournaments, half of it is about the show. You know, you want to create exciting moments for people at home, inspire people to play more Hearthstone. You know, compete in tournaments, try to become like the next Hunter Ace, for example. But you know, the Chinese tournaments, a lot of times, the prize pools would be adjusted such that, you know, like first place, for example, Tice winning an Aston Martin and then Zhao Ti winning the equivalent of 5% of that as a second. You know,
Sure.
it does seem like in the past couple years, year or two or so, the format has become a lot, not necessarily fairer to the players, but like maybe more reasonable would be the word I'd use.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just looking at this, because the mage is off to a mana-making start, and the priest is kind of chilling.
Yeah, not much has happened so far this game. They've just been playing their development tools, I would say. This is kind of like pushing the pawn to e4.
Blue getting a Reno is quite a big deal, though, I feel. That extra board clear and that extra little bit of armor could be a massive deal later on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a huge thing in the matchup. We've already seen like how important like the board state is for Mage in this matchup. So if you just have a clean answer to anything that they play, the form of Amazing, you know, like you're saying, that is going to be a not necessarily single-handedly game-winning card, but a very key part of that game-winning strategy.
Ulov is trying to work out how to get this Solarian not in the hands of the priest. Turning it into prime is a big deal.
I believe that means that Blue can fully invoke Galakron. He can also play the Fate Weaver with 2 invokes this turn. I really like that. Having access to all of these spells being reduced in costs.
Will he be looking to play Galakron before or after Reno?
I imagine after Reno. The value of that hero power seems pretty good, and after a certain point, you kind of want to limit the potential to lose from the Reno. Silence comes out, makes a lot of sense. Astromancer Solarian is one of the few ways that Mage can just dominate in the mid game.
One more turn and Ulov starts to go crazy. I wonder if that means he just goes for just a Doomsayer here.
If he Doomsayers here, does that mean that his game plan is delayed by another turn because he can no longer have
only if his opponent doesn't kill it?
That's definitely true. It does give Blue access to something like Fate Weaver Pass, though.
Yeah, but he doesn't know the plan.
He
probably does because everything costs 8 in Mage. So yeah,
the plan right now is Tortolan Pilgrim into Yog's puzzle box, right?
Yeah, I think he knows the plan. Let's face it. You'd do that on ladder, right? You throw out the Doomsayer against a random 10k legend player.
No, you still do that against the best players in the world too. Puzzle Box is a very strong card. It doesn't matter if they're, you know, rank 10,000 or rank 1.
No, I mean against the rank 10,000, you throw out the Doomsayer because you know they're going to kill it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes.
And then you go for the Tortolan and the Puzzle Box, and off you go.
That
but against the best players in the world, they're going to work that out, and there's no point trying it on.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I agree with that. Handful of nothing for Ulov, it feels like. This Tortolan Pilgrim really needs to find a spectacular play. I don't even know if Power of Creation is quite enough. Yikes.
That's probably not the spectacular plays he wants, but
no.
It can turn into it quickly.
It's Conjurer's Calling on the Tortolan Pilgrim is a way to fight back on this board. Very reasonable play, but that happens 1 in 4, 1 in 3 times. AI seems kind of lackluster because it's AI and Breath of Dreams or Arcane Breath. Excuse me, I'm getting all the breaths confused.
There's a lot of breath.
Meanwhile, my commentary is full of hot air, so it kind of fits.
Wow, nice link. That's the first time Blue's moved in about 2 hours.
He's a very stoic person on camera, for sure.
Something I noticed about you, Love, I've talked about like his micro from the Chinese casters ratings and the fact I used to think he wasn't that great a player. I don't want to be too rude to him, he was pretty good. But I did notice already this year in the other event that he was playing a lot slower, and that's how you fix your micro over time. Is to rope every single turn, bore everybody senseless, but double check and triple check everything before you do it. And that actually turns your micro a lot better when you come out the other side. And I suspect he's doing that a lot to fix that up at the moment.
For sure. I think a lot of this is kind of like subconscious. I don't really see a lot of players like actively changing their entire way they play Hearthstone. Like it might happen over time pretty slowly, but there's not very many people that are like, today I'm just going to rope every single turn. You know what I mean? That's just like kind of at the back rather than the front of their minds.
So to throw that forward a little bit more, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's something I noticed a lot during this tournament, is a lot of the, compared to the Grandmasters, a lot of the Chinese players play with their hands off the mouse.
There is some benefit to that, right? Because if you hover over cards and you like try to target minions and such, your opponent can get like a minor read of what those cards could be. Like if it's targeted spell, for example, then your opponent knows that it can't be, half the cards in the game anymore. Malygos doesn't target, for example. Acidic Swamp Ooze doesn't target.
I would venture that they're also trying to make sure they think before they play. Just that split second. How often have you made a mistake and realized instantly it was a mistake?
So my game plan usually, like I play pretty slowly, I would say. I don't.
You do actually.
Generally, when I approach Hearthstone, like I feel like my game plan is a lot different than Casey, because normally his first instinct is the right one, and I'm at the point where my first instinct is usually the wrong one, and my second instinct is usually the wrong one, and then like by the third time around, I'm doing something that's a little bit less stupid. So I usually like if I make a mistake, it's because I like just don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing in a certain spot. I think it's generally where my mistakes come from.
I think one of the most common mistakes is to be in a bad position and draw a card that looks good and instantly play it.
Yeah, that can definitely cost you quite a bit. Like Bronzebeard off the top when the Siamat might be better on turn 7, for example.
Yeah, you've sort of forgotten how the Siamat is now useful, and you see the Bran and, let's play it, whatever, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, the game's progressing once more. Not a lot's happened, actually. It's the same old, same old. Both fighting to make a board, but both players have so much removal because they're control decks that nothing's happened particularly.
A couple really scary things to keep in mind. That 3/7 has a Dragon Queen Alexstrasza in it, I believe, and there is an Amet in play right now. So if that 2/1 dies, the Amet is going to make another 2/7 taunt. The Reborn minion will just get buffed by the Amet because it does it on summons rather than played minions.
I'd like to see that more, actually. I'd like to see a word that replaces battle cry that means when the minion appears.
Sure. Interesting to think about. From Yulov's perspective, the big things that I see are there's a 1-mana Malygos. Obviously, that's insane. Is there a world where he can set up Alexstrasza face for a Malygos Zephrys for potential lethal?
15. There must be a world where something like that happens, right?
It requires a bit more, I think.
Yeah, but this deck plays boxers. A bit more can happen.
That's very true. Does Reno change anything?
I mean, he needs to do something, because this is actually going to get out of hand with all these 7 health minions if he's not careful.
Yeah, I think that Yulov has access to a lot of very high tempo plays right now. Caligos plus Conjurer's Calling on the 8/3 Dragon Queen Alexstrasza after it trades over the 2/7. There's a lot here. Yulov can also trade the Water Elemental into the 3/7 to deny it from summoning the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza as its Death Rattle. Beyond Caligos, there are still a lot more plays available. Alex Face plus Water Elemental Face also works. You develop the Evasive Fey-Wing alongside that. But if I was in Yulo's position here, I think I still would like to see some board tension. And Caligos Conjurer's Calling would be some good board tension for me.
Well, he's got to be quick if he's going that route. Oh, he thinks he's seen a lethal.
This does set up.
This is the one you were talking about.
This is Yulov's game plan to win. It might have come a little bit too early, and Apotheosis here is going to really make a mess of things for Yulov, I think. Renew as well. Another Renew.
So we've seen two people in position to set up Alexstrasza lethal around Apotheosis. One decided to go for it, and the opponent had the Apotheosis, and one decided not to go for it, and they didn't have it.
That's very true. By the way, if you chain 5 Renews in a row, is that called the Renew Jackson?
Oh my goodness. Oh, Gallant, you should have saved that one for the final. That hurts. I don't know if I can finish this cast now.
I just have to make your life so much harder, Lorinda.
I'm struggling already, man. Okay, so all the way back
25.
up, and the plan didn't work.
So this is kind of where I think that the Caligos play was probably just a bit smarter because, from Yulo's perspective, they had seen neither Apotheosis. That was like a big reason why the last time it made a lot of sense, and this time it made a little bit less sense. And the board, there was a lot of tension on board. The Alex Face kind of gave up board control. I believe the previous play with the Alexstrasza, the one from the last series that we casted, still maintained board parity rather than just ceding board to the priest. So,
I think the last one as well, if there wasn't Apotheosis, in fairness, I think he just loses.
Yeah.
Because it turns into a race that he can't win. But
yeah. So,
but like you say, the difference between not seeing one and seeing one is absolutely massive when you're halfway through the deck, and they were both at roughly the same point.
That's very true.
But Yulov still has a lot going on. With these reduced cards, he's actually got still a reasonable position, but a lot of damage has been done by this Amet.
For sure. Flamestrike here is still really good. You just combo it with the Malygos at some point to deal 8 damage to everything. He goes for the Frost Nova instead, probably opting to just try to lock up the board state. With this in mind, I'm imagining he has a way to deal lethal damage with the Zephyrus and the Malygos, but I don't really see it. 7 goes face. If you play the Malygos and like a large spell, then play a large thing, then play Zephyrus, would that be lethal? Because you deal 7, and then the Zephyrus would read you have +5 spell damage, and it would give you Pyroblast for the next turn. The Caligos would make that cost 0, so you'd have to spend a lot of mana first to make sure that the Zephyrus would want to get the Pyroblast to try to set up lethal, but that's just like a very soft setup, right?
Wait. It's silence now anyway. He's doing this instantly. Have we missed something really obvious?
I feel like we have, if this is happening so quickly.
Or has he forgotten that his Caligos is silenced?
This is still a totally fine, amazing Reno play. The Malygos plus Zephyrus was lethal with a 0 mana Pyroblast. So
yes,
Yulov would have to set up to get that 0 mana Pyroblast by playing a lot of stuff. However, that game plan is no longer on the table.
I think that was the plan, and then he realised about the silence, and now he's got to Reno to get himself out of it.
It's still a totally fine
Reno. Might be completely off the wall here.
Yeah, I think we both figured that one out, that he definitely meant to go for a Malygos Zephyrus game plan here, and it just did not come together. Minions that survive against Reno the Relicologist, that's big.
Yeah. But the bigger problem is here they've got taunt as well. Like, I'm still standing by my premise that the mage is the aggressor in this matchup. You can just stick taunts in the way, especially as Blue still has his own Reno to come. It's on the mage to actually win this game sometime.
I definitely agree with you. The more I see it, Priest has infinite value in the late game. Like you're not going to be able to play control against Priest. That's just not possible in the current state of Hearthstone.
And the mage draws a card or two as well.
Yeah.
That's the other problem.
And I think even in this game, there's probably a better chance to play for that board-centric position. I'm sorry to keep hammering this home, but I do think the Caligos Conjurer's Calling line was just an overall stronger play than the Alex All-In. And that would have played the board-centric position like you keep mentioning is so strong in this matchup.
I don't know if it's strong as opposed to your only option. So...
Right. Well, it is pretty strong. I guess it depends on whether you think Priest or Mage is favored. And I really do think it is based off of player skill rather than...
That's fair.
Like, every single game that we've seen so far, it's been mostly decided by the person that's playing well. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
Four face? Does that get the job done?
17. No.
You deal 4 face damage, they go to 17, they heal up to 19, they go back to 15. Yikes. Does not seem like it. They also have the 4-8 in play. Okay, so this is probably a turn to divert from that. And he's really juicing up this Malygos Zephyrus. Like, maybe this is a Malygos Zephyrus turn and just try to fight back for board that way.
But he hasn't got the Caligos anymore, so that's making it a lot harder.
Sure, but, Malygos means all of the board clears are still very cheap, like, very strong. Flame Strike will deal 9 to everything, and then there's just two 1s remaining.
But he's struggling to even hold on, let alone get in front. And he's down to 9 cards left as well.
That's kind of what I mean. I think that this Malygos Zephyrus is going to be used for a board clear anyways. There's really not a change to that, barring, Amazing Reno Pyroblasting Blue in the face. Which, could actually just be the highest win percentage line this game. Oh, is that lethal? 9, 11, 13, 14, 19? I count 19?
I count 19 too.
Huge pickup for Blue. I really think that You Love misses a shot this game to win.
Yeah, just by taking it a bit more steady. It's interesting, we've seen the same thing go wrong both ways, and I think both ways deserved to go wrong.
I agree with that.
Were misplays, basically.
Both times, I feel like the Priest understood the role in the matchup, and the Mage kind of didn't.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a 3-0 here for Priest. This group has just been the group of Priests. Apart from Orange sort of trudging along with his rogue.
He has the option to deal 4 damage to the 6/6, Reno the Relicologist, and then Radiance back up to 7. This is a full clear. That's exactly 10. That's a great Reno the Relicologist. That's about as good as it ever is going to get. You could even kill the weapon instead of just radiancing for 5 by taking the Bloodsail Corsair here, and that's probably a stronger play. Malygos still sets up for board control the following turn. That is a lot of resources being used by ULove right now. And Blue
the
still
Reno
has the
going
Reno.
Massive deal. And now Blue just gets this amazing Reno he's held onto all game.
I don't think Reno is the play here. I imagine that Breath of the Infinite... Oh. Breath of the Infinite plus Penance clears off everything but the 4/5, and...
Okay.
That seems like a very reasonable option. Or the 4/6, excuse me.
Yep.
and you accomplish what the Amazing Reno does with Breath of the Infinite and Penance, that seems, pretty darn good. This is just the most stuff in play, and I didn't think about this just yet, but it seems totally reasonable.
12. Yeah, so there's no lethal going to happen. So yes, your opponent now has to trade into all your stuff. Yeah, blue. Yeah, Yulov has to trade into everything, although he dies. So
I believe that he can double conjures. I don't think that Yulov can play around the Amazing Reno anymore. That's off the table. Like, if blue has an Amazing Reno, they always lose. So from the caster's perspective, this is like nearly 100% won game from blue. But from Yulov's perspective, he still has a lot going on. He can play the Malygos, deal 7 damage to the 8/8, trade over it with the 1/2. He can trade over the 3/2 and the 4/6, leaving up the 1/2, being alive at 1, and then double Conjurer's Calling on his Malygos to summon 2 9-drops. I think that might be as high as odds to win this game. That's not the line that he's going for, so it's probably also not the line that would ever win, just based off the fact that, it's... If there is an Amazing
he's just
Reno,
going for the highest odds is, this is fine, how does my opponent clear this board in some worlds, although he probably has a bit of a hunch about that, given this Reno's been in hand the whole game.
For sure. So Silence here would win the game. I still don't think this is a Reno board.
I mean, you try desperately not to if you can.
I don't even think blue's that desperate. Penance plus Breath of the Infinite clears up everything but the 3/6s. You put a taunt in the way as well. I would like to see maybe the 2/6 come out instead of the 4/5.
Yep. I mean, 2/6 has to be dealt with because you're on 2.
Oh, well, that's good. Actually, not good enough because the that minion still blocks all of the 3/4s.
This Reno's really tried, though.
Oh, he's given his best shot.
He's been given some fantastic spells, just not quite enough. I usually kind of forget they exist, and the spells sort of, it shoots its own minion for 1 or something, you just forget it happened.
That's one thing that I'm still really bad about, is not making sure not to concede against an Amazing Reno, because there's always the chance that he'll pyroblast himself in the face.
Pyrobat sounds like a world champion or something. But yeah, it is something I just tend to forget as well.
I think that Amazing Reno is like the best card at determining who has fighting spirit. Because if you don't, like, the people that concede versus Amazing Reno, and I'll admit I'm one of them, just don't have the same fighting spirit.
I like to fight on in games, got to admit. Mainly because I need to learn corner cases more.
For sure.
Not because I actually think I'm going to win one.
If it's a tournament, I'll fight on. If it's a random ladder game, that's more so what I'm talking about.
Soulmare is the silliest thing I've seen in some time.
Soulmare actually sets up lethal here. What's really interesting is that blue might have to play the Wild Pyromancer here instead of clicking the button. It does set up lethal, which is just like, it's a funny thing to think about.
Yeah, and he has not only has he got the fact that he's miles in front, but just the fact his Reno might do anything at any time can win this game now as well. It's actually genuine when the opponent's on 2.
Oh, that is
when
huge.
It's Pyroblast face, it's rough, but this is loads of things that can happen.
Cartoot Defender is really big here, right? It gets Yulov out of range, and we might actually have a game again.
Well, he's got 5 cards left. I've been trying to work out what they are. That's the main problem he has.
Murozond seems really powerful.
It really does.
6 drops don't really screw with you anymore. There used to be Blatant Decoy. Oh, wow. Let me check if Blatant Decoy is still in Standard. I feel like it might still be. Oh, and I should mute my... Okay, got word from the producer. Blatant Decoy still is in Standard. Apologies for not knowing that.
Yulov is just refusing to lose this game.
Double
He's
Conjurer's
launching a
Calling can come out.
counter-offensive.
Do you have any interest in killing a 4-2 here with 3-1? I think that's a pretty reasonable line. There's a 4-8 in play now, so you could make the argument that the Conjurers could still go on the remaining 3-1. It's less tempo, but less damage. And you might have to take a risk here to win. It is a risk, but it's a seemingly game-winning risk.
Yeah, I think you got to take a chance. Okay. Well, there's soul mirror proof. That's the only upside. Well, actually, there's shadow of death proof as well, which is another upside.
Kronks is not lethal. Soul Mirror still seems great here. A Mind Flayer Karj could come out.
Why isn't Kronks lethal? He was on 2 for ages.
Cartouche Defenders will do that. Karj comes out as well. This seems still locked up for blue.
Yeah.
6 ways from Sunday, but Conjurer's Calling could maybe get there.
It's got some work to do now, Gunnar. I've been on with you for this. It can get there for a while, but I'm not sure it can get there now. I'm going to need you to name cards at this point.
The amount of work this Conjurer's Calling has to do is about the same as casting like 18 Priest Mirrors in a row. So probably too much
Bunny
for a
Hopper
single
versus
card.
XHX. Mentally scarred from casting Bunny Hopper versus XHX.
Right. There's currently a 3-hour series between over 3-hour series of Bunny Hopper versus XHX on HS Esports if you want to watch some very long Hearthstone gameplay.
And by the way, that is completely edited down, so it's only the gameplay. That's 3 hours and 5 minutes of the finest gameplay with no caster drivel in between games or adverts or anything. It's just 3 hours and 5 minutes of Bunny Hopper playing Priest. And against Priest. And if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will.
We're getting close to the end here. This is not going to come down to what's in hand. This is going to come down to the random hero powers Amazing Reno has in store for us. Puzzle Box Yogg-Saron is like the out, right? I believe that Yulo still has a puzzle box in his deck as well, so there's a reason to keep fighting for him. Beyond that, I don't think the plays the players make matter. I think they're pretty obvious.
Yeah, Blue's just got the better cards in hand as well, and 2 extra cards in his deck. And he's on front on board, and he's ahead on health. Like, yeah.
Another minor interaction that I failed to mention is the fact that since Blue is the Amazing Reno and no longer is the Galakrond hero, Kronks is no longer active.
Good point. Well, I don't think Yulov's going to be active for much longer. He's going to need some crazy stuff to happen on the next couple of turns.
Conjurer's Calling on his own 5-drop. Is there any wacky minion that he could Conjurer's Calling from Blue's perspective? Maybe you need to save it for lethal damage with 2 King Crushes by getting a 9-drop off the Puzzle Box Yogg-Saron. That seems like an easy way to win.
I don't see any easy ways to win here. I guess you're right.
10 damage.
Swipe own
This is close to lethal, if not lethal. He has access to Breath of the Infinite plus Wild Pyromancer. Oh, but then you're ending up killing your own 4/3.
There must be a way to do this.
He needs to like discover a dragon. None of these discover dragons. You could play the evil conscriptor and then kill it with your own Breath of the Infinite to try and get a lackey that either rushes or shoots. Kobold lackey, excuse me.
This is nutty.
The math on this was just a little bit awkward here.
Yeah, Blue looks pretty flustered by it all. He hasn't looked any different for the entire match. It's amazing.
Was there a minion that he could have picked up?
I think he just decided to settle for I'm okay.
I think he is okay. I don't really see how this ever loses, but
here we go.
Maybe
well, this is how it could lose.
That's very fair. He's saving the World Elite fan in case his Amazing Reno plays a secret. All right, Puzzle Box, do your thing. Nice.
Okay. Sure. That's not going the right direction. Winning's the other direction.
Uh-oh.
Now he's drawing cards. That's not good. Winning's the other way. Turn around.
Put them back
in the wrong way. Oh dear.
Well, Puzzle Box won the game, Lorinda. Single-handedly delivering the lethal blow.
It's an all-kill for Blue, and Lucky Future get to play the semi-final against IG. I'll have the order for that for you later on. But the other semi-final will be Team Liquid versus T1.
And I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup because it's almost like the immovable object versus the unstoppable priest, with both teams having 3-0, 3-0, 3-0 with priest right now. So, it's going to come down to Blue versus XC. I don't really think any other player is going to matter in that matchup. And the winner of that is going to determine the winner of the entire thing. The entire
So
tournament.
Do you think they're going to play 3 best-of-5s and open up with priest versus priest in all 3 of them?
They have to do 3 priest best-of-5s.
So they play 15 priest matches?
Potentially.
Because they'll all go to 3-2, obviously.
Thankfully, it's not going to be 15 priest matches for that, but it will be interesting to see the best of 3, best of 5 series. I wonder if strategies will change throughout, like if they'll be able to ban differently from one best of 5 to the next best of 5.
I'm assuming so, yeah. I think they're independent. I've skimmed the rules, and this could all be completely wrong, but I believe that's the case how it works. So I assume it's 3 independent matches. I don't think it's each player. I think it's still the same format. We'll check it out anyway. But
for sure. So
lots of Hearthstone in these semi-finals. Put it that way.
For sure, it's gonna be a pretty long day then. I think because are we doing 2 semifinals or just 1? It's only 1, correct?
1 semi-final per day. Yeah.
Okay, so there will be
semi-final tomorrow, semi-final next day, final next day. All the Battlegrounds at the start of the days still as well. We get to find out who goes to the finals of the Battlegrounds. I think there's 2 more. There are 2 more matches for each team yet to go. And I think everybody apart from maybe Barcelona are still in contention for that.
Yeah, Barcelona had a pretty decent performance in the last day they played, but the first day was just brutal for them with multiple 7th and 8th place finishes. So it doesn't surprise me that they're knocked out currently.
Yeah, and World Elite going pretty well in there. If you're a World Elite fan, you still get to see them going along. And T1 are just killing everybody at everything. Surrender seems to be unstoppable at the Battlegrounds. So.
An interesting thing to note about WE specifically is that they were the only Chinese team to qualify for both Battlegrounds and the constructed portion of this event. It might seem like a lot of teams are qualified for both, but that's actually not the case. What happened was the Western teams were invited to both the constructed and Battlegrounds. However, the Chinese teams needed to play a preliminary set where if you want to catch these games, you can catch them on the HS Esports YouTube channel. Lorinda himself solo casted all of them, which was very nice of him. But yeah, 8 teams had to enter, and 4 of them qualified for this Gold Club World Cup. But WE was the only one to qualify for both Battlegrounds and Constructed. So just an interesting thing to know.
Yeah. yeah, looking forward to the next 2 days' play. Will there be more priests, or will they start getting banned? You have to tune in tomorrow to find out at the same time. So we'll see you then.